So about 5 years ago, I got my table saw and I built a table saw stand, which has worked amazingly well. It's mobile stand, which has a folding outfeed table, and it is one of my most popular projects. However, after using the stand for over 5 years, I have figured out that there are a few things that can be changed or improved in the stand to make it more functional and easier to use. Now, one of the key features of that stand is the folding outfeed table. And for that, I used folding table brackets, which was the best option available at that time. However, because those legs go onto the ground, I did have to figure out a way to compensate for uneven ground. So we have furniture levelers that are attached underneath. So every time you pull out the saw, you have to open the table leg brackets, and with time, those folding leg brackets have started to stick. So sometimes I have to use a hammer to kind of open them up, which can be really frustrating. So once you open it up, you have to attach the furniture levelers and make that outfeed table level enough so that the piece of wood glides nicely across the table saw and then onto the outfeed table, which can take a little bit of iteration and time and effort to put it together. And since I have built that, I have discovered folding tabletop brackets, which is something that I used on the Lego table I built for my son, as well as on the planer stand. So I think folding table brackets are going to be a game changer, because then you will not have to worry about uneven surfaces and having to level that entire table. Now, the second challenge I face with the table saw stand is that every time I'm trying to use a crosscut, so whether I'm using a crosscut gauge, the miter gauge, or I'm using the crosscut sled, every time it hits the table saw stand, and I can't really make crosscuts with those on that stand as is. So what I end up doing is I end up using 3/4 inch boards underneath the table saw to kind of raise it up so that I'm able to use my crosscut sleds, which is definitely not recommended. It is not at all safe to do that. And the third thing I wish I had built into that stand was something to be able to handle wider panels. So some sort of a support on the left side when I am trying to cut down larger panels. So that's it. There are a lot of big and small frustrations and problems with the original table saw stand design. So after over 5 years of using it, I have sort of figured out exactly what I want the table saw stand to do. So we are going to design and build a brand new table saw stand. It's going to be table saw stand 2.0 with a ton of brand new features. But before we get started, if you are new here, I am Anika, and I am here to demystify DIY and inspire and empower you to build all of the things. And now, let's get started. So first things first, I'm going to take apart the old table saw stand, and I'm going to try to reuse as much of this old material as possible, because saving money on lumber is a good thing. I was actually able to use up all of the 2x4s from the old stand, and I only needed a couple extra 2x4 boards. But if you are building this from scratch as well, I do have the detailed cut list, step-by-step plans, schematics, and tutorial available for you in a printable form, and the link to that is in the description below. I made all of the cuts on my miter saw. I was actually able to reuse some of the boards, and some of them I had to cut them down a little bit, so they needed new pocket holes. And I'm making pocket holes using my Craig 720. Of course, you can use any pocket hole jig. And if you need help deciding which pocket hole jig you should pick, I have a detailed video about that as well. All of these pocket holes are made in 2x4 boards, so the pocket hole jig is set at 1.5 inches and the drill bit collar is set at 1.5 inches. Okay, let's start putting it all together. So first up, I'm going to be building the sides of the stand. And one of the legs of the stand is actually shorter than all of the other 3 legs. So you want to keep that in mind as you are building, and pay attention to the direction that the boards are attached. We are attaching 2 2x4s at the top of this short leg because one of them is actually going to serve as the support for the drawer slides for when we install them. This entire setup with the legs is a little bit complicated because the direction of the back 2x4 legs is different than the front 2x4 legs. So it's a little bit wonky, and the reason for that is so that I can open up the extension table on my table saw, and I will show you that at the end. But as I was building, I had to be very careful about the spacings and the distances and the measurements, and all of this is detailed in the printable plans in the description below. With both of the sides built, it is time to put them together and create the basic frame of the table saw stand. So first up, I attached the lower aprons to both ends of one of the sides. And then I brought in the other side and attached it. Now this was a little bit of trying to figure out the best way to get everything stable. Now usually when I am making a stand like this, when I'm attaching aprons across 2 sides, I lay them such that the aprons are facing down and I can use gravity to help me put the pocket hole screws in. Now in this case, because the legs are oriented in different directions, it kind of became a little bit complicated. So I ended up having to lay the entire thing on its side so I could make sure that there was a stable situation while I put the screws in. And that is the starting frame of the table saw stand. And now I can cut out the corners of the plywood and put it in place, and that makes the bottom shelf, which I attached using 1.5 inch screws. Next up, it's time to build the drawer. I am using 3/4 inch plywood for this, so I used my circular saw and my Craig rib cut to cut down strips of plywood to use to build the drawer. And while I was making the cuts, I also went ahead and cut down the second shelf, the outfeed table, as well as the extension wing. I cut down the boards for the drawers to size on my miter saw, and I put it together using pocket hole screws. I do have a detailed tutorial on exactly how to build drawers 3 different ways, starting from the very basic as a beginner all the way to building it with a table saw. So be sure to take a look at that. Once the drawer is built, the most important thing is to make sure that it is square, which I realized it was not. So I compensated for it and clamped it and left the glue to dry overnight. Now the next morning I was good to go, so I'm going to go ahead and attach the 1/4 inch bottom of the drawer using wood glue and a staple gun. Before attaching the drawer, I need to attach the apron that goes right underneath the drawer. And I found that the best way to do that was to clamp a scrap board that would support the apron as I attached it. And then I attached the drawer slide, installed the drawer, and we have a storage drawer. This is also a great time to add casters to the stand because it's not very heavy just yet. So I attached my favorite casters for workshop furniture, which are these drop-down casters, which I am going to link in the description below. Next, I attached the remaining aprons on top of the drawer. This is going to support the shelf, which is going to hold the table saw. I cut out the corners for that shelf and attached it, and at that point I realized that I had cut out the corner that I didn't need to. So I tried to kind of patch it up with the cutoff that I had. At least it's going to look not as bad as without it. I attached the shelf using 1.5 inch screws, and now it was time to test out the height of the table with the table saw on it, which was perfect. So I went ahead and added the topmost aprons on both of the sides. Okay, so this right here is the folding table bracket, and it opens up like that and attaches right here. So now we're gonna have the plywood, the outfeed table, that's going to attach right here, and it has to be level with the table saw. So that's exactly where we are going to attach these brackets, and then the outfeed table is going to come on top of it. Now, I think the best way to do this, to make sure that the height of this is exactly such that this is level, is probably to use this as a dummy. So I'm going to attach this to the bracket and then attach the bracket and take this off, and then we'll be able to attach the final outfeed table. Same thing with the extension wing as well. So I attached this scrap piece of plywood to the bracket and used that for alignment, and marked exactly where I needed to drill the pilot holes to attach the brackets to the stand. I repeated the same thing for the extension wing as well. Now, one thing I did not show here was that I realized that I needed to switch out the 2x4 with a 2x6, so I had enough surface area to be able to attach the brackets. I attached the plywood to the brackets, and that is the folding extension wing. Now, for the outfeed table, I am going to attach the plywood with only 2 screws, one on each bracket for now, to get the alignment and the positioning. Then I transferred the measurements for the grooves onto the outfeed table. Once I have everything marked, I can remove the plywood and draw out exactly where the grooves are going to be. I went about 12 inches into the outfeed table. Now, to route it out, I am using a straight edge guide, my handheld router, and a straight cut router bit. Once the grooves are routed, the ends are not square, so I used a chisel to clean that up, and now I can go ahead and install this outfeed table onto the brackets. Once I attached the outfeed table, I tested if the miter gauges worked, which they did, so we are good to go. Now, last, we need the drawer front, which I cut out on my table saw stand, so I took my new stand for a mini spin. I attached the drawer front and I added a pull to the drawer, and that is it. Crosscut sled fits right into the shelf, and the drawer holds all of my table saw accessories. And here, my friends, is my brand new, super compact, extremely functional and mobile table saw stand. It is super quick and easy to set up, and to be honest, I am very excited to be able to use my crosscut sled, and as well as having that extension wing that is going to make cutting down larger sheets of plywood so much easier. Don't forget to grab the plans from the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.